everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lifestyle Matters. And once again, we've got the good Dr. Saveena with us. So, Saveena, we've previously discussed the low-carb, high-protein diet, but I think now we'll push the boat out a little bit further and talk about the keto diet. So, can you first of all explain to us what exactly is the kind of the micronutrient composition of a keto diet in terms of the comparison with the Australian guidance on what a regular diet should be?
Yeah, okay. So, if we wanted to link it back to even our last episode when we talked about the low fat, low carb, high fat diet, the keto diet is very similar to that. The main difference with the keto diet with a low carb, high fat diet is the fact that a keto diet places a great emphasis on our fat intake, which is about close to 60% of our calorie intake, which is really, really high because compared to what the dietary guidelines, which recommends, 10%, well, less than 10% of calorie intake. This is recommending about 60%. So the emphasis is really on our fat intake. Carb, on the other hand, here is also emphasized, where we're meant to be only taking in 5 to 10% of our of calorie intake, which equates to about 20 to 50 grams of carbs in, for example, in a 2,000 kilocalorie diet. Protein, on the other hand, is about 30% of total calorie intake once again. And that's what a keto diet looks like. So predominantly, it's a lot about the main thing is about the fat to carb ratio. That's the 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio that people commonly go on a keto diet and they follow.
Yeah. So when we think about what the regular Australian guidance is, if we're talking about 20 to 35% fat content with, as you say, 10% saturated fat limit. And the keto diet really just explodes that out of the water. We're emphasizing a high fat, including high saturated fat diet. And then when we're talking about carbs, the regular Australian guidance is that, you should be eating 45 to 65% of your diet as complex carbohydrates. And really we're blowing that one out of the water as well. And we're saying, very, very low carb content. So it's actually an ultra low carb diet really is keto. And then the rest of the shortfall is made up with protein. So what does it look like? I mean, I've heard stories about, butter and coffee for your morning coffee. I mean, what does it look like?
Yeah. Okay. So can I just, before I go, how I like to know the origin of diets about each diet that we talk about. I just want to talk about the origin of this diet.
And tell us about the origin then.
I mean, it's just a quick thing really about it. It was, once again, in the 1920s, some guy sort of found out about it, and he developed it actually to treat epilepsy. And that was the main reason. And in fact, even once anti-epileptic medications came about, this diet sort of went out of fashion a little bit. And we'll come into a little bit more why later, but now it's come back into fashion because people have realized it also promotes weight loss. And that actually comes down to ketones. And I guess that's, we'll explain what ketones are about and things like that. And I guess going back to your question about what it actually looks like, what a regular keto diet looks like, as you pointed out, it looks like a diet rich in fat, and it doesn't certainly say it has to be, your moofers and poofers. It just says high fat intake. So that means you've got free reign in eating, whatever meats you want to eat, or if you want to sort of keep on top of eating more like avocados and nuts and eating more moofers and poofers, you're more than welcome to. But, anything. So you can eat bacon and sausages and carry on with life. So that's basically what you're doing in terms of a keto diet, and you're heavily restricting what you're eating in terms of carbs. And that means you're losing out on a lot of nutrition that you can potentially get from vegetables, like, your pumpkin, potatoes, sweet potatoes, your starchy foods. And that's what it looks like, really.
So there's a lot to unpack. So really it's basically open season for high fat foods, but you do run the risk. What I'm hearing is that you do run the risk of water soluble vitamin deficiency and micronutrients like minerals and things like that, because as you say, certain food substances, essential vitamins and minerals, are not present in high-fat diets.
Yeah.
So
And
there is
truth
that
be
issue.
told, yeah. And really, in our body, I mean, we actually produce ketones all the time. And that's what this whole keto diet's about, isn't it?
Yeah. But going back to the essential point about the fact is that this is a high-fat diet. That really does blow out of the water this idea that to lose weight, you've got to have a low-fat diet. That fat is actually bad for us. It's not bad for us. So refined carbohydrates and saturated fats are bad for us. But the keto diet emphasizes a high fat diet, including high saturated fat, and low carbohydrates, including low refined carbs. And you can lose weight on this. So it really, to me, highlights the fact that the old myth about a low fat diet being the key to weight loss, it blows that out of the water, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Yeah.
It goes to show that our body has so many different ways of handling the foods
Yeah.
that we eat, the macronutrients we eat, and there's so much to understand about it. And I think there's still ongoing research with all these diets.
So we've said that the keto diet is a high-fat diet and it produces ketone bodies. So what are ketone bodies? What's the biochemistry underlying that?
So ketone bodies, right? So essentially, as I was pointing out earlier, our body produces ketones at very small amounts all the time. It's not something that's unusual for our body to go through. Pathophysiologically, so medically speaking, there are certain medical conditions, like, when you're starving for long periods of time, or if you're a diabetic who's got uncontrolled sugars, you can also go into a state of ketoacidosis. And that basically means ketone levels that are really high, producing high, basically pH levels that are really low, causing acidosis in your body, an acidic state in your body, essentially.
My understanding of ketones is that they are the products of beta oxidation, which is the metabolism of fatty acids. So when we consume fats, basically fat is a combination of glycerol, which is a joining molecule, and various lengths of chains of fatty acids. And the way the body chops up these molecules, the fatty acids get into the process of beta oxidation, which then produces ketone bodies. And two of the well-known ketone bodies are beta-hydroxybutyric acid and acetoacetic acid. Now, they're both acids, as you say. And I think it's important to emphasize the point that beta-hydroxybutyric acid needs to be distinguished from gamma-hydroxybutyric acid, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. But we'll come to that relationship in a moment as well. So as you say, the diet itself is not the only cause of production of keto acids, is it?
No, it's not. And I guess, why, I guess now if we talk about how this diet actually produces ketone bodies, it comes down to what we've spoken about many episodes before about what happens when our body needs energy, essentially.
Yeah.
So if we think about it this way, where usually carbohydrates are the primary source of fuel for our body. And what we're doing with this diet is we're limiting the carbohydrates as our source of fuel. What ends up happening is that then our body goes through two different processes. One's called gluconeogenesis, where it's actually making sugar, your glucose molecules, from amino acids, which we get from eating protein. And obviously our proteins also, once again, slightly limited in this diet. So, there's only so much of gluconeogenesis can happen from these proteins that we eat. Body can't get enough energy from it anymore. What happens then? It shifts onto ketogenesis, which is basically breaking down your fatty acids to provide energy, and that will produce your ketone bodies, which was what you were talking about, your beta-hydroxybutyrate, acetone, your acetoacetic acid. So all those things get produced as part of this breakdown process.
So really, it's important to understand that the adult human body doesn't actually need carbohydrates to survive. You can get all of your energy requirements just from fats because you have glycerol and you have ketones, and ketones are a very good substrate for respiration, or for metabolic respiration. So
yeah, and our brain's actually pretty good in using that. As you would know.
Yeah, our brains like ketones. So I suppose this is a useful segue into the excuse me, the role of ketones in brain health. So we know that peripherally produced ketone bodies cross the blood-brain barrier and can be used as a metabolic substrate for brain tissue. They don't require insulin to cross the blood-brain barrier. There are a couple of significant neurological processes that are impacted upon by ketone bodies. One is purinergic and GABAergic neurotransmission. So there's a lot of inhibitory neurotransmission going on. And another process is the modulation of potassium channels in the brain, which again causes brain inhibition. And a third process is the development or the stimulation of brain-derived neurotropic factor, otherwise known as BDNF, which helps brain neuronal health. So those three processes are all impacted positively by ketone bodies, and they have been found to be protective against degenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, and also they are useful in the management of certain types of epilepsy. And this goes back to the original discussion that you pointed out to us, Saveena, that actually the keto diet was first discovered by a neurologist who was trying to treat childhood epilepsy. So we know that, we all think that our tissues need sugar to rely on for their energy, but we've just heard that the brain can use ketones as a form of energy. There are, however, certain kinds of cells that cannot use ketones for energy. What are they, Saveena?
Yeah, so as you said, most cells can use it, except for two cells that obviously one's an organ and the other one's a cell. One's your red blood cell, just because it doesn't have mitochondria, and those are basically your energy stations in the red blood cell. And the other thing that can be used ketones as a source of energy would be your liver, because it lacks a certain type of enzyme to utilize the ketone bodies as a source of energy. But the rest of most of the rest of your body can really use it quite well. So you can see why it's been so good.
So we're talking more about the keto diet in terms of lifestyle medicine. So really, we're not really looking at it in terms of how it treats epilepsies. But to suffice to say, it has positive effects on brain health. But it also helps with weight loss, and it also helps with dyslipidemia. Would you care to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So going back to the way we divide how much of macronutrients you consume, so it comes down to the carbs. Remember, I said that 3-1 or 4-1, which is your fat to carbs ratio. So essentially, you're having very small proportions of carbs in your diet. Carbohydrates get broken down into sugar, and obviously, if you don't have much carbs, you have less sugar. That triggers off less insulin. And insulin, as we know, promotes fat storage, promotes sugar storage, and that doesn't happen so much because your insulin levels are lower. The other thing it does, it seems to also promote satiety by increasing our leptin levels. Remember, we used to call that the miracle hormone for a while, that we thought that was discovered to help with weight loss. And that seems to help increase those levels too.
Yeah.
That's an area where there has been a lot of research, and they actually haven't found consistent results to say, hey, this is what exactly why it happens. But there has been a lot of evidence pointing to this is what happens. But to understand it further, there is still ongoing research on that field.
So to summarize, it makes you feel better, it makes you lose weight, and it makes you full more. That's what the keto diet does for you.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, it's a miracle cure, isn't it? So how easy is it to adhere to? Because we've already said in previous episodes that really the key to any diet is adherence and compliance. So is it an easy diet to follow?
Yeah. So, as you said, it sounds like a miracle cure. Once again, all the research has been only for about 24 weeks, so it's only about for 6 months that they have studied. They haven't had very long-term data on it, firstly. So, we pointed out about potential mineral deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies, and even before when we talked about low-carb diet, potentially at the risk of osteoporosis. All that still plays a role in this, and there is so much we don't know about it, the impact of it long term. Short term, as we pointed out, we said it improves your reduces your risk of Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative diseases, improves your good cholesterol lowers your bad cholesterol, and reduces your risk of epilepsy or epilepsy seizure thresholds. So all those are potential benefits in the short term, but no one has actually said it's beneficial in the long term. How easy is it to follow? Not really, as with most diets, because it is a huge shift from how we commonly eat. And in the first few weeks, lots of people actually have a lot of side effects from it. And nausea, they might have some headaches, might just have this, commonly people describe like a brain fog. They call it the keto flu, which can last for a few weeks. But if you pull through it, then, potentially it could work well for you to promote weight loss.
It could work well. Now, are there particular people that just cannot do the keto diet? Are there contraindications to the keto diet?
Yeah, there are. So essentially people who actually have certain medical conditions, certain enzyme deficiencies, where it's like certain enzymes to break down the fats and molecules and convert energy in a different way, would be one of those. So for example, people with pyruvate kinase deficiencies, carnitine deficiencies, people who've got pancreatitis, inflamed pancreas, they also should not be having it. People who have liver failure, because you think about it, your liver's going to be on overdrive trying to follow this diet. And people who have troubles with metabolizing fat would be also falling into this group.
So it's not for everyone. It's difficult to adhere to, but there is evidence of benefit in the short term. I think we'll leave it there, Saveena. Thanks very much for your pearls of wisdom on this subject, and I look forward to chatting with you again very soon. Thank you, Saveena.
Thanks, Ferghal. See you next time.
That's all for today's episode of Lifestyle Matters. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.